Hi everyone, my name is Alex Pangitakis and I'll be discussing technology in assessment. First of all, I want to discuss the 5 important keys to implement effective assessment. Stiggins outlines this in his book. You should have a clear purpose, clear learning targets, sound design, effective feedback, and an effective rubric or checklist. Clear purpose is very important. This really drives your assessment. It needs to answer the question, what information will the students need in order to perform the assessment? You need to identify what the results are intended to tell the teacher. Without a clear purpose, the assessment may not answer the questions you intended it to. For example, a student may get a good grade, but along the way, you may notice that they did not actually meet the learning goals. The next key is having clear learning targets. Stiggins defines learning targets as statements of what we want students to know and be able to do. In order to create an appropriate and meaningful assessment, learning targets must be clear and fully developed. These clear and achievable learning targets is what actually creates the assessment. So we should be assessing students on those learning targets. Learning targets range from procedural to complex. So here are some examples. So students will be able to use the unit circle to find 6 trigonometric values of reference angles. This is more of a knowledge level procedural goal. So that means that it will take a lot less questions or a lot not as complex questions in order to assess whether students reach this goal. But then if you have something like students will be able to explain how the unit circle is created by using special right triangles, this is a disposition level or a more complex knowledge goal. This will take more than just a multiple choice question to see if the students answered that. So depending on the learning target, your questions of your assessment is going to have to fall into those fall in with that. Sound design is the next key to having sound design. Sound design includes choosing the best method to assess the learning goals. So it's kind of what we just discussed with those learning targets. The teacher appropriately pairs the learning target being assessed to one of the categories. It is important to recognize that there is not one method of assessment that is better than the others. So for example, you're not just going to use multiple choice for every single learning goal, or you're just not going to use open response for every single learning goal. Some sound design examples: if I wanted to assess students on how to just solve an exponential function, which is a knowledge target, I would use a selected response. However, if I'm assessing students on analyzing graphs of exponential equations, which is a reasoning target, I would use a written assessment. A teacher should use all methods to assess based on the learning outcome. If the wrong method is chosen, teachers and students will not receive the feedback as it was intended. That is why sound design is so important in creating a quality assessment, and Stiggins talks a lot about this in his book. Now, it's also important to know the difference to when to use formative and summative assessment. This falls in the category of sound design. Formative assessment gives teachers instant feedback so they know what students need extra support. So formative assessment occurs throughout instruction, while summative occurs after instruction. Formative is a cycle of assessing and relearning, while summative does not go back or require relearning. Formative is used for immediate feedback, like I just said, and summative is used for evaluation of student achievement for teachers' administration state. Formative is not given typically a grade or a score. Summative really has that grade and score. Formative is more informal, while summative is more formal. So it's important to also know when to use formative or summative assessment. Examples of formative assessment would be homework, classwork, checkpoint quizzes, exit tickets, Kahoots, while some of the examples is end of the unit tests, midterm final exams, or high-stake tests. The next key is effective feedback. Effective feedback has 6 main features. Effective feedback must be goal referenced. This means that you're giving the student goal-related information about their actions. It also should be tangible and transparent, which means the results must be related to the goal must be tangible. An example that was used was a joke. If you tell a joke and you see people laughing, that means you told a good joke. If you do not see people laughing, that means your joke did not land. It must be actionable. This means it must be concrete, specific, and useful. Some non-examples of this would be saying just good job or you did this wrong, B+. You need to specifically say what should be done next time to get that goal. It must be user-friendly, so avoid too much technical information. Instead, give one thing that the teacher noticed that the student should work on. Also, it needs to be timely. Feedback needs to be given in a timely manner. If not, the student will continuously make those mistakes that you are trying to have them fix. It must be ongoing, so students must be given opportunities to use the feedback. And then also it must be consistent, which just requires using rubrics and exemplars, which I'm going to discuss next. So it's very important that when assessing students that you're using a rubric or a checklist. This creates no bias and students know exactly what they are being assessed on. So the difference here is rubrics are guidelines to determine the quality of a product or performance. So a rubric I have an example of here is one that I do for my picture project. There are different categories: recognizable, creativity, graphs and numbers, and then there are points assigned to that. You should, when you're creating a rubric like this, have the exemplar or what you want the students to achieve in that left-hand column, and then go down in points. So then each student will know exactly what they need to do in order to get all of the points. Or you could just give a checklist, which is a list of behaviors or steps that are checked off as either completed or not. So example here, it's just student presents a clear idea of what they want to create. That's either a yes or a no. There's no points assigned to it. It's just a check, yes or no. Rubrics and checklists are a great way for teachers and students to stay on track and stay consistent throughout. It's also really important to give students these rubrics or checklists at the beginning of a project or assignment so they know exactly what they are being assessed on. Now I'm going to dive into technology in assessment. So the three I wanted to discuss today, they're all more formative assessment. Are Google Forms, Edpuzzle, and Kahoot. And Google Forms, you would just use your Google login for that. Edpuzzle, I have the website down below, and same with Kahoot. So with Google Forms is free. You just need a Google account. It's a great way to assess students and give instant feedback. Now, these questions can range with multiple choice, open-ended, checkboxes, drop-downs. Students can also upload their work. So this is great for math and science teachers. I used this a lot last year when we were all online. Students were able to answer all the questions and upload their work so I could then see the PDF version of their work. Now here, if you go into Google Forms, this is what it would look like. So you can select the type of Google form you want to create. So that ranges from you can create your own blank quiz, or there's exit tickets, assessments, worksheet templates already there for you. If you want to create a multiple choice question, here's one example that I have where students comparing fractions. Now you can assign just one correct answer, and this is an example of a multiple choice. Here's an example of an open-ended question. So you would add all of the correct answers that it possibly could be to an open response question. Also, it has a feature where you can give feedback for the answer. So say a student gets that wrong, they will immediately get that feedback to set up a linear equation. And then from there, they may figure out, oh, what I did wrong and how I can get that answer now. A great thing also about Google Forms is you can view the results by an individual or by the question. So here is just by the whole the summary of how students did. So this is number of respondents, and then it shows you the points that they scored. And then I can go more in and look at the questions, see what questions students got wrong, and see what questions students got right. So it's great for a teacher to then go in and see what needs to be worked on. and what students need more help. The next thing I want to discuss is Edpuzzle. So Edpuzzle is free, but subscription allows you to upload unlimited videos. It's great for a flipped classroom. So you can track, actually, after you upload those videos, how long students viewed that video. Another great part about Edpuzzle, which adds an assessment, is you can input questions along the way to assess students' progress with the topic. So just how you would do in a lecture by asking a question, you can pause that video, will pause for you, and those questions will come down. It's a great way for students to stay on track and a great way for teachers to then assess how the students did. Edpuzzle classes directly linked to Google Classroom. You can upload your own video, which I like to do, or you can do a YouTube, Khan Academy, National Geographic, TED Talk, and many more. So it's a great resource to have, especially if you want to do something like a flipped classroom. It's a great way to assess students while they are watching that video. Kahoot is always a crowd pleaser. Students are always engaged. It gives instant feedback for a teacher and student. This is also free. You can create your own, or you can find one that's already created and edit it from there. You can play it live, or you can assign it for homework. So what Kahoot is students use their phone to look at the projected questions on the board. So they will enter a code and they will join into the game. They will be asked, you can now even do open-ended questions, so it's not just multiple choice anymore. And they will answer their question, which will then give immediate feedback for whether they got it wrong, and the teacher can also see that. Also, at the end, teachers can go back and look at the player's summary. You can see how the players did, what questions, what were the difficult questions, and what time it took for students to answer each question. And you can also add feedback in here as well. So typically right on the left is the player's name, and it will tell you exactly, just looking at one question, what the student answered and whether it was correct or not. It will also show you the time it took them to answer that, so you can see whether students are guessing or not. Kahoot is a great resource, so is Edpuzzle, and so is Google Forms. These are all great, especially for formative assessments. Here are my resources. I also have them below for each slide. Thank you so much for listening.